Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM and AM 630. WMAL.
7:07, happy Monday morning to you, Brian Neiman and Mary Catherine Ham here on the Morning Majority. Brian Wilson's got the day off. Hopefully he'll be back tomorrow, feeling a little bit under the weather. Joe DiGenova, our legal expert, joins us now, former federal prosecutor. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Brian and Mary Catherine.
Well, Saturday night we heard the unfortunate news that Whitney Houston had died. Now, apparently they did an autopsy yesterday, and usually these things are released quickly, but they are not releasing this autopsy at this point because apparently the detectives don't want it released. What do you make of that information?
Well, I think probably what's going on, I'm out here in California.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I'm still in Palm Springs, and I have been watching intently the local coverage of this story, and it has been, as you might imagine, absolutely intense, given the Grammy Awards and everything around it. This is probably because of the toxicology report, and I think they want the coroner to be quiet because they don't want to have a story be told 4 times with 4 different endings. In a case like this where there's a notorious death of a famous person, the best thing you can do from the perspective of law enforcement is to wait until you have your facts straight. And I think what they're mostly concerned about is they want to make sure that there are no illegal drugs in her system. Then if there are, that raises a whole bunch of other law enforcement questions. So I think they're trying to make sure that they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's. Right.
Because if there are illegal drugs involved, does that then make police want to question where she got those drugs from? And could that person be held somehow criminally responsible?
Theoretically, yes. And I think that's what they're worried about because while it is apparent from news reports that there were a slew of prescription drugs in the room, they haven't said anything about the presence of illegal substances, but that doesn't mean they weren't present. So I think they're being, which is surprising for the L.A. coroner, being cautious. I'm sure you all remember the notorious Dr. Thomas Noguchi, who used to talk about everything in the first 15 minutes.
Well, we were talking about recently how readily available everyone's 911 call is when the Demi Moore stuff happened.
Yes.
Do those ever end up being sealed, or are they always just right away to the press?
Pretty much as a matter of public policy, most police departments, unless there's some specific investigative reason, will release those almost immediately to the public. I'm not necessarily in favor of that, and the police do have the authority to keep those secret if there is an investigative lead in there that they don't want people to know about, and they still don't have, for example, a perpetrator, and they're trying to find out who that is. They can keep them secret, but it's become routine to release them, and that's pretty much the case all over the country.
It was reported that she was in the bathtub. Is there any significance to that? I've heard a couple of different theories around that. I don't know if it had any significance to you, as someone who's been around, murder cases before in the past.
Well, the only thing that was, that may be one of the reasons they're not giving out the cause of death, because apparently she may have drowned in a relatively small amount of water because she had some sort of seizure or reaction to a huge amount of sedatives in her system, which basically paralyzed her and made it impossible for her to get out from under the water. The speculation out here in the press is that this was actually a drowning.
All right.
I want to ask you about the Yardley Love case going into its 2nd week right now. Exactly what, that's the one where the UVA male lacrosse player attacked a woman lacrosse player and she later died of her injuries. What is the defense going for in that case?
I think they're trying to avoid the most severe punishment. The entire case is revolving around the notion that somehow the medications that she was taking affected her ability to survive, and that therefore he is not responsible for her death. I think it's really a stretch, but I think what they're aiming at is trying to avoid the most severe punishment possible. So their entire defense is already directed at sentencing. Otherwise, it's a pretty lame approach to the defense, but that's the reason for it.
If it's a murder one case where they have to have, it was premeditated, do they have to then show that he went in there with the intent to try and kill her? I mean, is that something they have to convince the jury of, or is the fact that he did kill her and that there were some threats in the past, would that be enough? I mean, that's kind of a fine line to walk, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's one of the ways to prove it. The other way to prove it is that he took her computer and took it away from the scene, and that makes it felony murder, which also makes it first-degree murder without premeditation.
Okay.
If you commit another crime in the process of committing the killing, then that makes it first-degree murder.
All right, we've talked endlessly with you about the individual mandates in the healthcare law and how it is constitutional and it's not constitutional. What about this fight that they're having now with Catholic charities and Catholic schools saying that you have to provide birth control or contraceptive care for women? Is that legal? Is that constitutional? This can't pass muster, right, Joe?
Well, this is a very difficult question when the federal government starts. The federal government, remember, it's different when a state tells you, because insurance is generally regulated by the states.
All right.
It has been since the beginning of insurance. Now the federal government, through Obamacare, is requiring insurance companies to do certain things, and by law, having to include things in a policy. I think ultimately what the importance of this issue is not necessarily so much the issue itself, which I think is very, very serious, but it's the cumulative effect on the 9 justices seeing this thing play out in public and getting a live, everyday example of how Obamacare is going to affect people's lives and what private companies and private citizens are going to be required to do. The president may have won the politics on this temporarily, but from a legal standpoint, this has been a disaster for them because it shows exactly what the problem is with Obamacare. And I think from a timing standpoint, this could not have been worse.
I've been sort of amazed by the fact that the left can so quickly present new rights to us. As like suddenly this week, it became a right to have completely free birth control. Where did this come from? It's amazing.
You will note that one of the most important things in the president's little speech the other day, when he told about his grand compromise, some compromise, is that this was going to be that the insurance companies were going to be required to contact people and tell them that they could get this without a copay. I mean, this is really quite remarkable stuff. But again, what it shows is that this is what the power of Obamacare entails. They are going to detail every bit of health care that you can get and that you cannot get. And this is the beginning of rationing, and the skeletal structure for complete imposition of medical rules for every private citizen is here, putting aside the individual mandate where you're required to buy insurance. I mean, it's just remarkable. And by the way, there's a sleeper issue here that's beginning to get some ground. In Obamacare, they actually required states to increase their participation in Medicaid in order to be able to participate in Medicaid at all. Increase benefits, increase coverage. That is a sleeper issue in this case, and I'm going to make a prediction today that when the Supreme Court takes up this case, they're going to strike down Obamacare, not on the individual mandate, but on the expansion of Medicaid as an unconstitutional expansion against the states.
Wow.
That'll be a very big issue.
All right, bold prediction there. We always appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for getting up bright and early, especially out in California.